Have you ever felt like you were carrying a weight that didn't even belong to you? A deep sadness, anxiety, emotional exhaustion, patterns that seem to repeat no matter how hard you try to escape. What if I told you this pain might not have started with you? What if the wounds you're battling today were actually written into your story long before you were born? Carl Jung revealed a hidden truth that most people never talk about, a truth that explains why so many of us feel stuck, lost, and disconnected. The greatest burden a child must carry is the unlived life of their parents. Generational trauma, family wounds, invisible legacies passed down, silently, through words never spoken, emotions never expressed, and pain never healed. You were born into a story already in progress, into a family system shaped by survival, silence, and unprocessed pain. And unless we make the unconscious conscious, that pain doesn't just disappear, it becomes our fate. It shows up in our anxiety, our relationships, our self-sabotage, our fear of abandonment, our inability to rest, to love ourselves, or to fully belong. But here's what no one told you growing up. You are not your family's pain. You are the one who has the power to break the cycle. And the fact that you're here, right now, hearing these words, is not a coincidence. It means that maybe for the first time in your entire lineage, someone is finally asking, what ends with me? And before we begin, I want you to make this a declaration, not just to the algorithm, but to your soul. Type in the comments right now, I am the cycle breaker, because the moment you say it is the moment the healing begins. This is not just a video. This is a portal. Back to yourself. Back to the parts of you that were never broken, only buried beneath generations of pain. If you're ready, take a deep breath. Because what you're about to learn might just save you from living 30 more years trapped in wounds that were never yours to carry. That doesn't match your story. A constant feeling of not being enough, even though no one ever said it out loud. And maybe no one had to, because the silence was loud enough. Carl Jung spent his life studying a truth that modern psychology is only beginning to fully understand. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And for most of us, that fate isn't ours. It's a script handed down from generations before, a story written by the hands of people who were themselves wounded. Maybe your mother was taught that her emotions were too much, so she learned to silence them. And you inherited that silence. Maybe your father carried the burden of never feeling good enough, so he taught you, unintentionally, as to chase worth like it was something outside of yourself. Or maybe it's more subtle, a tension that's always there, a constant fear of being too much or not enough, a pattern of choosing partners who can't love you fully, or friendships where you're always the giver and never the one held. And you've tried, you've tried, self-help books, meditation, therapy, telling yourself, I just need to think positive. But no matter how much you try to change the surface, the same patterns keep showing up, again and again. Why? Because this isn't just mindset. This is lineage. This is nervous system programming passed down from ancestors who didn't have the tools, the awareness, or the language to heal. Carl Jung called this the inheritance of the unlived lives of our ancestors. The emotions they couldn't express, the grief they couldn't process, the anger they suppressed, the dreams they were forced to abandon, became a part of the family system. And now, it lives inside of you. But here's the truth. No one told you growing up. It doesn't have to stay. It ends when you decide it ends. Right here, right now. You are not the wound. You are the healer. You are not the cycle. You are the one who breaks it. And today, you're going to understand why your nervous system has been stuck in survival, why your relationships mirror the same pain over and over, why your body holds tension you can't explain, and how, for the first time in your entire family line, you can choose something different. This is not just about healing yourself. It's about healing forward and backward for the generations that came before you and for the generations that will come after. So stay with me. Don't click away, because what we're about to unpack together might just be the moment that your life finally begins to change. The family wound you didn't know you were carrying. Let's be brutally honest. Most of us are walking through life thinking that the anxiety, the fear, the emotional pain we carry is ours. I'm just too sensitive. I must be broken. There's something wrong with me. But what if that isn't true? What if the constant self-doubt, the people-pleasing, the inability to rest, the fear of abandonment didn't start with you? Carl Jung said something that echoes louder than ever in today's world. The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of their parents. Think about that for a moment. You didn't just inherit eye color or hair texture. You inherited unfinished emotional business, unprocessed grief, suppressed rage, shame, silence. Maybe your mother grew up in a household where expressing emotions meant punishment, so she learned to numb. And now, you battle with disconnection, not understanding why you feel so far from yourself. Maybe your father was raised by a man who never told him, "I'm proud of you." And now, you find yourself chasing approval, overworking, overgiving, constantly afraid that if you stop, love will disappear. And the scariest part, none of this happens consciously. This is not about blame, this is about biology, about survival, about nervous system programming passed down like an invisible inheritance. Modern science now confirms what Jung saw decades ago. When someone experiences trauma, whether it's war, abuse, abandonment, betrayal, or even growing up in emotional neglect, it doesn't just stay in the mind. It imprints on the body, on the nervous system, on the very genes themselves, through a process called epigenetic inheritance, which means if your grandmother lived through chronic stress, fear, or emotional suppression, her body adapted to survive. Her nervous system became hypervigilant. Her stress hormones shifted. Her capacity to feel safe was altered. And that adaptation, it didn't end with her. It became part of the emotional DNA passed to her children and to you. This is why sometimes you feel anxiety that has no explanation. This is why you might walk into a room and feel like you don't belong, even if nothing happened. Why you sabotage love or chase people who cannot give it. It's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system was taught long before you were born. Connection is dangerous. Being yourself isn't safe. Love has to be earned. And here's the trap. When we don't understand this, we internalize it. We say, "I'm the problem. I'm too needy. I'm too emotional. I have to fix myself." But what if the truth is, there was never anything wrong with you? The problem is the wound that's been passed down for generations. Carl Jung believed that unless we do the work of individuation, the process of breaking away from the unconscious patterns of our lineage, we will spend our lives unconsciously living out the pain, the fears, the disappointments, and the shadows of those who came before us. This is why your nervous system still braces for rejection, even when you're surrounded by people who love you. This is why rest feels unsafe, why stillness feels terrifying, why you overfunction in relationships, always becoming the caretaker, the fixer, the one holding everything together. Because somewhere, long ago, someone in your lineage had to survive by being hypervigilant, by never resting, by always proving their worth. And the body remembered, the nervous system remembered, even when the mind forgot. But here's the most important truth you will hear today. If this was learned, it can be unlearned. If it was passed down, it can stop with you. And when you choose to do this work, when you choose to face what was once unconscious, you don't just heal for yourself. You heal for every ancestor who never had the chance, and for every future generation who will now be free from the cycles that tried to define your family. This is not just personal healing. This is ancestral liberation. So stay with me, because in the next part, we'll go even deeper into how generational trauma rewires the brain, the nervous system, and even your sense of identity, and more importantly, how to break free. The hidden blueprint, how generational trauma programs your brain, body, and identity. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why no amount of affirmations, no amount of positive thinking, no amount of just move on ever really worked? Why, despite all your efforts, you still feel that heaviness in your chest, that constant tension in your jaw, that overthinking that never, ever stops? It's because trauma isn't stored in your mind, it's stored in your body. Carl Jung understood something long before modern science caught up. That trauma, especially generational trauma, doesn't live in memories. It lives in the unconscious, in the nervous system, in the shadows of the psyche, the parts of you that you had to hide, abandon, suppress, not because you wanted to, but because survival demanded it. And here's the part that will change how you see everything. When a child grows up in an emotionally unsafe environment, whether it's direct abuse, neglect, chronic stress, or even generational wounding that no one talks about, the brain physically changes. The amygdala, the part responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes hyperactive. The hippocampus, the part that regulates emotions and memory, shrinks. And the prefrontal cortex, responsible for regulation, decision-making, and empathy, starts going offline when triggered. Translation? Your brain literally starts to see the world as dangerous. Not because the world is dangerous, but because, somewhere back in your lineage, the world was so now. A partner's silence feels like abandonment. A co-worker's criticism feels like danger. A friend's disappointment feels like rejection that might destroy you. Not because it's happening now, but because your nervous system is still living in yesterday, in your parents' pain, in your grandparents' fear, in the silence, suppression, and survival patterns passed down like invisible chains. And here's the cruel trick trauma plays. When this happens, your mind creates a story to make sense of it. I must not be good enough. I have to work harder to be loved. If I rest, I'm lazy. My needs are a burden. But none of these were ever true. They were coping mechanisms, born from nervous systems that had to survive. Here's what Carl Jung taught. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This isn't just poetic, it's literal. That fight you had last week? That spiral of anxiety when someone didn't text you back? That pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable people? It's not about what's happening now. It's the echo of an old wound, being replayed. Until you see it. Let me make this real. A child grows up with a mother who was emotionally shut down, not because she didn't love the child, but because she never learned how to feel safe with her own emotions. Her mother, your grandmother, grew up in war, in poverty, in chaos. She learned to survive by suppressing her emotions, by staying numb, by being strong, and that became her definition of love. So now, when the child, you, expresses sadness, the mother shuts down. Not because she's cruel, but because sadness was never safe in her nervous system. The message received, my emotions are too much. If I express how I feel, love will disappear. Fast forward to adulthood. That child now finds themselves in relationships where they don't speak up, they suppress their needs, they settle for less, they overfunction, they exhaust themselves trying to be easy to love. And they wonder, why does this always happen to me? The answer is not because they are broken, it's because their nervous system was wired long before they had a choice. This is generational trauma. But here's the part no one tells you. If the body can learn survival, it can learn safety. If the nervous system was programmed for fear, it can be rewired for peace. If you inherited the wounds, you can also be the one who ends them. This is the sacred invitation of individuation, a process Jung taught as the ultimate human journey, the path of no longer being unconsciously run by the wounds of your parents, your grandparents, or your past, but instead, consciously becoming who you were always meant to be before the world told you otherwise. And yes, it's messy, it's painful, it's not a weekend retreat, it's the daily practice of not abandoning yourself when you feel triggered, not silencing your needs to keep the peace, not shrinking just to be loved. It's looking the wounded parts in the eye and saying, "You're safe now. I see you. I won't leave you again." Because if no one ever told you this before, let me be the first. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not your mother's silence. You are not your father's anger. You are not your grandmother's fear. You are not your grandfather's absence. You are the one who gets to break the chain. You are the one your lineage has been waiting for. And what happens when you do? The body begins to exhale for the first time in decades. The mind softens. The nervous system finally learns. It's safe to be me. And that is what liberation feels like. So how do I heal it? How do I stop carrying what was never mine to hold? How do I become free? Let me tell you something that Jung taught and that neuroscience now confirms. What was once wired for survival can be rewired for freedom. Your nervous system is not broken. It is programmable. But here's the truth most people never hear. Healing doesn't come from reading more books. It doesn't come from pretending to be positive. It doesn't come from waiting for someone else to save you. Healing is a process of coming back to yourself, of meeting the parts of you that were exiled, abandoned, hidden, and showing them, you are safe now, you belong, you are allowed to exist. Step 1. Stop abandoning yourself. Every time you said yes when you meant no, every time you stayed quiet to avoid conflict, every time you dismissed your own feelings to keep others comfortable, your nervous system learned, being me isn't safe. So the first step, the foundation, is this. Start asking yourself, constantly, what do I feel? What do I need? Am I betraying myself just to be accepted? And when the guilt rises, because it will, remind yourself, this isn't selfish, this is survival, this is healing, this is reprogramming. Step 2. Make the unconscious conscious. Jung said it better than anyone. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Look at your patterns. Why do you feel invisible in certain relationships? If I'm perfect, I'll stay safe. If I take care of everyone, and maybe I won't be abandoned. These are not flaws. These are survival codes written into your nervous system. The goal isn't to shame them. The goal is to understand them and begin rewriting them. Step 3. Reparent your nervous system. This is the sacred work. The work of becoming the loving parent your younger self never had. When the anxiety rises, when the fear whispers, when the old voices say, "You're too much. You'll never be enough." Pause and place a hand on your heart. Feel your breath and say, "I am here now. I won't abandon you. I am safe. You are safe." Do this every time, because the nervous system doesn't heal through intensity. It heals through consistency. Not once, not twice, every time. Step 4. Normalize grief. Grief is the doorway. Grief for the love you didn't receive. Grief for the years spent betraying yourself. Grief for the little child in you who believed, if I'm just good enough, they'll love me. Let it rise. Let it wash over you. This isn't weakness. This is the moment your body realizes, it's safe now to feel what I never got to feel back then. Step 5. Redefine safety. Safety isn't someone never rejecting you. It isn't being perfect. It isn't controlling everything. Safety is an inside job. Safety is knowing you will not abandon yourself. Knowing you can hold yourself, even when others can't. When you heal, your nervous system heals. Your energy changes. Your relationships change. Your children, if you have them, will never have to carry what you carried, because it ends with you. And that is how generational trauma is broken. This is what Carl Jung called individuation, the sacred process of becoming, not who the world needed you to be to survive, but who you were always meant to be, to thrive. The sacred ending, this is where the cycle breaks. Take a deep breath. Let this moment land. Because if no one has ever told you this before, let me be the one to say it. Clearly, loudly and with love. You were never broken. You were never the wound. You were never the pain passed down through generations. What happened to you was never your fault. The silence, the abandonment, the shame, the patterns you inherited weren't yours to begin with. But here's the truth no one ever told you growing up. It was never supposed to be your job to carry it. And yet, you did. Not because you were weak, but because you were strong, because you are a survivor of things you were never meant to survive. But survival is not the end of your story. Survival is just the beginning. Now comes the return, the sacred return to yourself, back to the version of you who was never too much, never not enough, never unworthy. The version of you that was buried beneath the noise, beneath the wounds, beneath the masks. The version of you that was always waiting for you to come back home. And if right now, as you listen, there's a lump in your throat, a heaviness in your chest, a tightness behind your eyes, that's not weakness. That's not brokenness. That is the sound of the wound unraveling. That is the moment your nervous system whispers, it's safe now to finally exist. Jung said it best. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who they needed you to be to feel safe, not who you became to avoid rejection, not the mask, not the persona, not the overachiever, not the fixer, not the peacekeeper, you, the real you, the one underneath all of it. And I won't lie to you. This journey is not easy. There will be grief. There will be resistance. There will be days when the old stories scream louder than your healing. But listen to me closely. Every time you pause, every time you breathe, every time you whisper to yourself, I'm here. I am safe. I won't abandon you ever again. You are breaking a cycle that's been running in your family for generations, a cycle of silence, a cycle of self-abandonment, a cycle of believing you are only worthy if you perform, if you please, if you shrink. But it ends with you. Because here's the most sacred truth of all. If the wound can be passed down, so can the healing. When you heal, you are not healing alone. You are healing the generations that came before you and the generations that will come after you. This is what legacy actually means. Not wealth, not achievements, not status, but breaking the chain and leaving behind a blueprint of freedom. And if you take nothing else from this video, let it be this. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are not behind. You are becoming who you were always meant to be, so take this breath as a sacred promise to yourself. The promise that says, I choose me. I choose to come home to myself. I choose to heal. And let that be your declaration today. Type it in the comments right now. I am healing. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but for your soul, so that it's written, spoken, witnessed. This time, I choose myself. And if you're ready to go even deeper on this journey, to break generational trauma, to reconnect with your inner child, and to finally step into the life you were always meant to live, you'll find the link to my ebook below. It's not just a book, it's a guide, a map, a step-by-step blueprint for healing based on Carl Jung's teachings, and everything no one ever taught you about your nervous system, your subconscious, and your true self. And if this message spoke to something deep inside of you, join this community. Subscribe, because here, we don't just talk about healing, we live it together.